Hey, welcome. This is Derek McCaw talking to you from Fanboy Planet, and today I'm actually talking with Rylend Grant. So, in this concept of being the Fanboy Planet team up, Rylend is the other host of the Writer's Block with David Avallone, and we talked to David last week about his Kickstarter, and this week we're talking with Rylend about his. So, here it is, Rylend Grant, who is a screenwriter, comic book creator, Ringo nominee. Four nominations this year for your book Banjacks, correct?
Yeah, for this go around, yeah.
Yeah. And if IMDb is to believed, you were like a stabbing vagrant in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. So you've been homeless in the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, I have you bounce around Hollywood enough, and you end up kind of in the background of this. I also another claim to fame. I played a dead body on CSI one time, which was quite the experience.
Well, that is exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I've written in Hollywood for 15 years. I wrote film and television projects, mostly kind of big poppy action movies for folks like Ridley Scott and J.J. Abrams, and John Woo, Luc Besson, Justin Lin. I've been around for a while, kind of like my friend Avallone. And if you look at Avallone's IMDb, I think it's more eclectic than mine even. But you make friends and you go to visit sets, and strange things happen.
There you go. Well, let's begin by talking about the Kickstarter you launched today, the Peacekeepers, which is a dark crime book. You've gone to Kickstarter, and so the question I'm going to ask is: I talked to David Post a few weeks back when he launched his, the OZ, and he told me that you were one of the people that had inspired him and drove him to try Kickstarter. So what made you turn to Kickstarter in the first place?
It's funny. This is like it's a baton that we keep passing on down the line. I was due for a Kickstarter for about 2 years before I actually made the jump, and I do that with a little kind of wink and a nod, because the book with which I made my jump to Kickstarter was called The Jump. I was inspired by folks like Charlie Stickney in particular, who I think he's made probably 200 grand on Kickstarter over the years with a book called White Ash, which is now being released by Scout Comics. Great book. And Russell Noelty is another guy who's been on Kickstarter for years, and those guys are close friends. I mean, there's a list of these people. I'm going to leave some out, but and they preach the kind of the beauty and the joy of Kickstarter for years to me. They were right about a lot of things, and that it's such an interesting kind of rabid fan base there. And what you find, and I'm sure David Pepos talked about this, is that there are people that buy their shops, their comics in shops, and there are people that pretty much exclusively buy their comics on Kickstarter. It's almost like separate markets, and it's gotten to the point, particularly now, where if you're not kind of serving both markets, then there's a hole in your game. You're really missing out. What I loved about what I saw is that it's so interactive. I mean, I've released books in comic shops for 4 or 5 years now, and you put a book out, and whatever, it gets reviewed, and some people hit you up on Twitter, but for the most part, you don't get that immediate feedback. And with Kickstarter, it is immediate. You put something out there, and you immediately have 10 messages, 10 comments. They cheer you when you do something wrong. They keep you honest when you're. They cheer you when you do something right. They keep you honest when you do something wrong. Excuse me. So that was really exciting to me. That was what I found. So I don't do anything just quickly, straightforward. I have to kind of study things backwards and forwards before I'm going to get into the water. And so about 2 years before I took my first jump into Kickstarter, I started putting together Kickstarter panels at cons. I'm in this unique position where I basically have an open invitation at most cons to kind of stage whatever panels I feel like. I have a lot of creator friends, and one of the ways I kind of give back to the community is doing these kind of how-to panels. How-to panels inspired me, and so I feel the need to pay it forward. And so I wanted to know about Kickstarter. Didn't know everything I needed to know about Kickstarter. And so what I'll do is I will find 5 people that are smarter than me, in terms of a given subject. I will put them on stage in front of a con crowd, 50, 100, 200 people, and I will pick their brains. And so I did that probably 6 times, and had guys like Charlie and Russell and Christy Shin and Don DeWin and all these people who had kind of done it well and done it right. And I kind of wrote the book on Kickstarter based on these panels and these sort of interview type situations as much as I could before I dove in. And then I dove in, and it was just great. I mean, it was everything. What kind of kept me from doing it for the longest time was the fear of the fulfillment. And I will say the fulfillment was awful the first go around. I mean, sitting there and having to hand package hundreds of these things.
I'm following Dave Papos and David Walker both when they talk. They talk about they've emptied comic shops out of bags and boards, and they've got these cases. That's got to be insane.
Yeah, and Pepos, Pepos has really blew up. I mean, that was the funny thing about Pepos is, I launched my first campaign, and I think, I did extremely well for a first campaign. 335 backers and $15,000+. It was a great run, and that's kind of what you hope for. And the funny thing is, Pepos was kind of adamantly against Kickstarter for a while. He didn't think he would make enough money. He thought it wouldn't be worth all the trouble, all of that stuff. And as I was taking the plunge, I kept trying to convince him to also take the plunge because I was drinking the Kool-Aid. And he's like, I don't think so. And then when he saw the reception of mine, when he saw what I did, he's like, oh, this seems reasonable. And even up to the last minute before he fired up that campaign, he was worried that he would not make the $6,000 goal that he had set for himself. And to make the long story short, he made that goal in, I don't know, about 2 hours. And then I think by the end of the first day, he had made as much as I did in my entire campaign. And then he went on to make $45,000 or something like that. So it's a blessing and a curse. One, he made $45,000 on his campaign, which of course, he doesn't make all of that. A lot of it goes to the artist and the shipping and all that stuff. However, he made quite a bit of money. That said, it's going to take him, 2 months of working every day to ship all that stuff out. So he's earning every penny of that.
Just have Action Lab do it for you? I'm just curious. But let's talk about the actual book that you're launching, which is the Peacekeepers.
Sure.
So tell us about the Peacekeepers.
So it is a dark, quirky drama in the vein of Fargo or No Country for Old Men. Basically, if you like those movies, or if you like case of season police dramas like True Detective or The Wire, if you like Elmore Leonard books, if you like comic masterpieces like Criminal or 100 Bullets, you're gonna love this thing. Sort of badass, kick you in the teeth, kind of crime action movie. Again, my day job is kind of writing these movies, and so this is kind of like an action movie come to life on the page. All that said, this is very different from what I normally do. It's very different from the stuff I've done before. The Peacekeepers is an idea that I've been working on for 15 years. I've wanted to write it, but Hollywood hasn't let me write it. To a certain degree, traditional comic avenues wouldn't let me write it. And it's the beauty of Kickstarter is that you can do anything you want on Kickstarter as long as it's good. The readers will love it and embrace it. And so it's kind of the gift of Kickstarter is that I now get to kind of do my dream project and people care about it, and they're running to support it, and they're excited about it. So we're only kind of a few hours into the campaign now here as we record this, and we are well on our way. I think we're up near around $4,000, and on our way to 60 backers and all that stuff. So it's we're off to kind of a shotgun start now.
Cool. And what when you say Hollywood wouldn't let you write this? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you've been screenwriting and knocking around the town for 15 years. Has that really been something that you've said, like, I've got this idea and nobody wanted to?
Well, here's the thing. I grew up, without going too far back, I grew up during the Sundance movement, right? I saw Pulp Fiction, and I said I want to do that, and I came out to Hollywood to make those movies. I went to the American Film Institute Conservatory, in Hollywood, which is where David Lynch went, and Terrence Malick, and Aronofsky, and a bunch of kind of snooty indie filmmakers like that, and that's where I was. And so, I came out here to make Pulp Fiction, and I got the education I needed to make Pulp Fiction. And by the time I was kind of spit out into the workforce, Hollywood stopped making Pulp Fiction. The entire indie film business had kind of dried up. It moved on to television in a weird way, but that's an entirely different monster. And what Hollywood makes right now, you can kind of fit on a postage stamp. There are basically 5 different movies that they make. And they just make variations on them. And that's kind of what I've been paid to write and rewrite these past 15 years. And I'm not complaining because, again, my day job, I get to write movies and TV projects for a living. It's kind of my dream job. But yeah, it's, to a certain degree, there are stories that only a handful of people, only the Aronofskys of the world are allowed to tell in Hollywood. Right now. And so while I haven't had to do anything but write movies for 15 years and they paid for my house and all that noise, I have been frustrated in a lot of ways. And so this is a story that, I've always wanted to tell, but there wasn't a buyer for it at the moment. I mean, the irony of it all is you turn it into a comic and then Hollywood comes a knocking.
Yeah.
I've seen it that. I mean, the funny thing is my business essentially for the last 8 years has been kind of generating, IP. When I first started, my screenwriting career, you wrote a spec, you took, a spec script, you took it out, and if it was good, you sold it. And I did that for a while. But then the financial crisis hit, the writer strike hit, and Hollywood kind of used that as an excuse to kind of remake the way they do business. And so overnight, they're making about a quarter of as many films as they were making a month ago or a year ago or a couple of years ago. And they stopped buying original ideas. Essentially, we entered this age of IP where everything, intellectual property, everything had to be based on something, right?
Right.
A book, a short story, a comic book, a video game, whatever. We've seen it firsthand. And so I had a couple of lean years there. So one day I kind of got wise, and I'm like, well, okay, if Hollywood wants IP, why don't I just give them IP, and took this idea that been kicking around for a long time. And again, another one of these ideas that I didn't think that I could sell in Hollywood, given the current rules and the current state of things. And so I wrote it as a short story. I got the short story published, and then kind of overnight we had a bidding war on the short story. We had Justin Lin on one side coming off the Fast 6 opening, which was the largest opening in Universal history, and we had Robert De Niro and Brett Ratner on the other side. Tyler Perry made an offer. It was a big deal, and so we sold that. And the agents, the managers thought it was kind of a fluke, but short and sweet. I did it about 6 more times with short stories, and so kind of just generating IP kind of became my business model, I guess. And it's it's weird. It's like it used to be that you were a screenwriter or you were a fiction writer or you were a comic book writer and all that stuff. And what I'm seeing more and more is that that's not really a way to it's not a way to survive. It's not a way to stay relevant. You need to kind of be a writer. You need to be a storyteller, right? And of course, if you're going to tell a story in comics, you're going to do it in a different way, in a respectful way than you would, if you're writing a movie or a TV show or something like that. I mean, and there are stories that won't work in comics, and there are comic stories that won't work in film, and all that noise. But there is a lot of crossover right now. I think what a lot of people, are sort of failing to recognize, and I think very much their detriment, is that all of these businesses, the fiction business, the comics business, the film business, are sort of hopelessly intertwined now.
Yeah.
If you can embrace that, which guys like Avallone and Pepos have, truly, I think it gets you very far, you know.
Yeah, and so let it go to that. Your first comic, that at least I was aware of, Aberrant, out of Action Lab, that's getting picked up. So there it is, right? You've created that as a comic, but it is becoming or is in talks to become a TV series.
Yeah, no, I mean it was optioned very quickly. It was actually I think 2 weeks before the second issue hit newsstands. Yeah, Aberrant was optioned by Tony Krantz, who is the producer of 24 and Felicity, and produced Mulholland Drive for David Lynch, and he's doing Wu Assassins for Netflix right now. But yeah, so yeah, being developed right now as a TV series for a streamer. And so yeah, that happened very quickly. And the Aberrant one is funny because it was I mean, Aberrant is like about as comics a story as you can get. I mean, I wrote that without any thought of it ever being optioned or anything like that. I mean, it's essentially it's my twisted Captain America story, and there's a way of looking at Banjax, my next book, as it being my kind of twisted Batman story. It was kind of
Okay.
my first two books were very much they were my reaction, my response to 30 plus years of reading and consuming comics, and it's this is what I've taken from all of that. And then after that, I've kind of moved into, okay, well, what are the different sort of corners of the kind of human experience that I want to explore, and and that's how you kind of end up with the Peacekeepers. It's like doing something very different. If you can do anything in comics and go anywhere in comics, then what is the weird place that I want to go that I can't easily go in movies and TV, and that's how I end up there. But I have probably 4 other titles in the pipe in one way or another.
Okay.
And a lot of it has been kind of held up and hampered by COVID. I had two books with bigger publishers that were set to be announced, and then it was pencils down everywhere, and then people started getting fired, and some one of those books is definitely out and available now, and the other one we're still trying to figure out if it's going to go or not. And that's part of the reason that you end up on Kickstarter also, is like, okay, well,
Sure.
you start to have this kind of pile up of projects. And ultimately it's like you write these things, and they're great in your mind, and particularly, the art's beautiful and all that noise. And you want somebody to see them. Right. And it's kind of the beauty of what's happening. It's happening specifically on Kickstarter, but in the comics business in general right now, is what we're seeing is kind of this creator empowerment era. If you're a basketball fan, we've seen the player empowerment era kind of play out over the last decade, right? Guys like LeBron James and Kevin Durant and Kawhi Leonard sort of, wrestling power away from the owners and deciding where they play and who they play with and all this noise. I would argue that like a similar thing is kind of happening in comics right now, where creators are no longer waiting for permission from publishers to kind of do the book that they want to do, right?
Right.
With sites like Kickstarter, excuse me, frog in my throat. Ooh, let me.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so with sites like Kickstarter, you can go directly to the consumer, and you will be celebrated for it and embraced for it. And so guys like Pepos and I, the kind of peons in the industry, maybe that's discounting us a little bit, but we haven't, we're not the A-listers, but we went to Kickstarter with our books kind of out of necessity, right? Pepos was dealing with some of the same things I was, where it's like he has a lot of books and he has a lot of stories he wants to tell, and they're kind of sitting on the shelf. And he was having trouble with getting publisher green lights because the world is so crazy right now, and comic shops were closed and pencils were down everywhere. And so, well, there's this opportunity. Let's just take it. So I went there with the jump. I went there with Peacekeepers, and what the people who have come before us have shown us. Charlie Stickney, who I mentioned before with White Ash, is the prime example. it used to be that if you went to Kickstarter, you weren't going to be able to go the traditional publishing route, but that's just not the case anymore. Image is publishing books that were on
Right.
Kickstarter. Charlie
think
just
that,
had an amazing release with White Ash via Scout Comics, and
I think
yeah,
Dark
so.
Horse has picked up a couple of things, or maybe that I'm thinking it's that they're picking up Comixology books as well. So I mean, yes, it is a new frontier for comics. But let's talk about your podcast as well. I got Avallone's point of view last week. How about yours? What led you to the writer's block?
I take all the credit for it. I'm the heart and soul of that podcast, and Avallone's just along for the ride.
Absolutely no. It's refreshing to hear.
Yeah, I'm joking. I think I watched the show with Avallone, and he pitched it probably a lot more eloquently than I will. But the comics business, the comics experience has kind of been decimated by this pandemic, right? And cons were kind of the heart and soul of this experience. I mean, for people like you, for people like us, for the people watching, the whole 9 yards. It was kind of where we all got together and where cool things happened and great panels happened and great discussions happened. And I have tried to help recreate that experience piece by piece in whatever way I can. So it started out, I got involved with the Mainframe Comic Con. They put on 3 online Comic Cons since kind of COVID started, since the beginning of all this craziness. And in my opinion, they were the best online cons we've seen. The panels were great. The community was great. They found really interesting ways to kind of give you an authentic con experience online. And so started kind of getting a lot of creators together for panels, on those Mainframe Comic Cons. And so we had at some point kind of recreated about 80% of the experience. And then we were all kind of talking, and it was like, okay, well, what are we missing? And like the thing that we really missed about cons was, they call it bar con. It happens after the con day. You spend all day on the floor and you're hawking your books and you're shaking hands and you're doing all that. And then at some point you look down at your watch and you're like, it's time. And you go across the street to the bar or the restaurant, whatever that's across the street. And we all sit down and we all just kind of talk shop and for a couple of hours. And we miss that. And, if you look at, I mean, the cliche of this pandemic has been that everybody has a podcast now, right? And everybody who ran out to kind of create, established podcasts, they had their corners and everything. Everybody who kind of ran out to create their comics podcast, like amid this pandemic, they're mostly the same, right? And so we weren't going to do that, but if we were going to do one, we were going to do something that no one else was doing, and because Avallone and I, we have a lot of friends in this business, and we've done a lot of bar cons over the years. We were in this kind of unique position to kind of bring something to fans, to the comic community that wasn't there, and so we got some of our closest friends, David F. Walker, who you mentioned, and Kevin Eastman, and Charlie Stickney, who I was just talking about, and we usually have 2 or 3 guests every week, and we bring them on, and we just rap, and it starts out, we usually have a topic, and we're usually talking about the state of the comic union, whatever's going on at the moment, and with the business, and then it over time kind of degenerates into us arguing about old Star Trek episodes, or sharing old war stories from the CSI set or whatever. Okay.
When conventions start up again, are you going to continue the Writer's Block as a podcast, or are you going to be able to actually? Are you looking forward to returning to actually getting to do this as panels, to meet up with people in person?
Well, I mean, when the cons fire up, we will certainly return to doing panels and working our stools or whatever, like we did before. But I don't know. I think we've kind of struck a chord here. I think we found something. It's been wonderful, and it's been fun, and there's been an enthusiastic response to it. And as long as that continues, I think we'll continue doing the podcast. And I mean, the beauty of I mean, the beauty of this stuff is you can kind of do it anywhere, right? So
Yeah.
when we go down to San Diego Comic Con, maybe we'll bank 3 or 4 of these because we'll be in a room with some people that we wouldn't normally be in the room with, so yeah, I'm excited to do that, I think, and also I'm kind of excited to see how it changes if we actually get 4 people in a room and do this. I mean, I think that'll be a different dynamic. I mean, we're so used to looking at little heads in boxes
Yeah.
on a StreamYard feed. That yeah, I mean, I wonder how things will shift when we're all actually, I mean, sitting in a bar. Though, maybe it'll have to be a hotel room or something like that because a lot of loud people in bars at San Diego during Comic Con week.
I will vouch. It's very hard to record a podcast in a loud bar. But
Yeah, God.
well, thank you so much. And again, for people, the Peacekeepers just launched on Kickstarter today, which is October 19th. So you have until November 19th to back that. It is doing well. I backed it before we started this recording. You can
Thanks for
also
that.
look for Banjax and Aberrant. And you said The Jump as well. And of course, look for the Writer's Block podcast with Rylend and David Avallone, last week's guest on Fanboy Planet Team Up. So thank you all for watching this. Thank you, Rylend. And remember, use your powers for good. Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on any Fanboy Planet videos. And remember, use your powers for good.